Khamzat Chimaev is taking on Nate Diaz at UFC 279, and I have the betting tips, technical breakdown, and prediction for you. Hey guys, welcome back to Ascendant MMA. This week we're bouncing back to a pay-per-view already. It seems kind of quick to be back to a pay-per-view after UFC 278, but we're back here with UFC 279. There's a couple of interesting matchups, so we're really looking forward to breaking down the main event with Khamzat and Nate Diaz. Interesting fight to say the least, but we'll get into that a bit more later. We're going to break down that fight and a few others that catch our eye from a technical angle and provide our insight and perspective on that. Stay tuned at the end as we'll recap our awesome, we had a pretty good week last week, so we'll recap that at the end. But without further ado, let's get into the first fight. So the first fight we're going to break down on this card is Kevin Holland, who's taking on Daniel Rodriguez. So just a bit of pre-warning. The main event is a weird matchup, so there might be a little bit more time spent on the co-main in this fight, but nonetheless, there's going to be a good breakdown. So let's get into this one. This is Kevin Holland's third outing at welterweight. We've got D-Rod returning back for his first fight since his win over Kevin Lee in August of 2021. Been out for over a year. He had a hand injury and it's kept him out. In the year that D-Rod was out, Holland's fought 3 times. We all know he's a very constant fighter. He's always in there. He had a no contest against Dorcas, which you all remember. And then he had his win over Oliveira, and he also had his win over Tim Means, two kind of veterans in that welterweight division. Holland's, had his stint at middleweight, which was largely successful, where he showed his pretty spectacular finishing ability, really. His power, accuracy, his durability all on show. Had 8 wins, 5 finishes, and lost by a decision 4 times, mainly off the back of his takedown defense being pretty weak. But it looks like he's, spent time and he's worked on that. So good on him. Daniel Rodriguez 6-1. The one loss on that is a pretty questionable split decision loss to Nicholas Dolby, which in my opinion he won. But anyway, he's had 3 finishes and a couple of pretty impressive wins really over Kevin Lee and Mike Perry. So pretty decent competition from the both of them. Holland's coming into this one with a 3-inch height advantage and a 7-inch reach advantage. But in terms of the strength, I think it's probably on Rodriguez's side, but we'll see. So a little bit about Kevin Holland. As I said earlier, he fights very often, so we see a lot of him. And what we've seen is that he's very dangerous in all areas of the fight. He shows a real distinct ability to want to finish the fight, which I love. And he has finished fights from a lot of different areas. So, when he knocked out Joaquin Buckley, that was a distance off his straight shots. When he knocked out Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, that was in the clinch with knees and elbows. When he fought Charlie Ontiveros, that was from top position and a slam. And when he knocked out Jacare, that was from the bottom when he was threatening submissions and throwing strikes off his back. So he's pretty dangerous wherever this fight goes. In terms of his arsenal, he's got a lot of weapons. He's got just a great ability as, a counter striker. But he also is really, really unorthodox, where he will throw like weird jumping kicks and kind of karate chops and leaps and punch from awkward angles and weird leaping power shots. But as you take a look at his resume and his overall game, it works for him, and it helps him earn plenty of KOs by catching his opponents off guard. So his 2 main vulnerabilities that we've seen so far, being taken down and wrestled. Saw that in the Brunson loss, and we saw that in the Vettori loss. And also, it can be his cardio in later rounds. He definitely slows down as it goes on. And as good as he is, his awkward styles and really unorthodox movements means there are a lot of openings for counters against a really intelligent striker. And, he can be guilty of overcommitting too much to power shots, as a lot of people can. But this can definitely lead to a takedown from D-Rod, or even a nicely placed counter left, which is in D-Rod's wheelhouse for sure. Holland has really good BJJ. He's fighting out of Luda BJJ, who's a world-renowned black belt. But this means, it's not the end of the world if he gets taken down. But we can see with these guys who are really comfortable off their back, they just too happy being on bottom position and threatening but not finishing fights. So it can be detrimental to his game. So we'll see what happens here. He also doesn't really have the best footwork, and he kind of relies on his threatening with his power and explosiveness to kind of keep his opponents at bay and not rush in on him. So that paired with his length and reach make him really hard to kind of go up against. Daniel Rodriguez, he's been on a really steady, incline in the UFC as of now. He made his debut in 2020 and, pretty active in that COVID UFC Apex kind of era. He's a very powerful southpaw with really good boxing combos. He's got nice kicks to the leg and body. He's got really good fundamentals and good power. And in terms of his jab, it's probably one of my favorite in that whole division. To the untrained eye, he can look a bit slow, but his movements can look a little bit labored, and maybe doesn't look like he's the most explosive guy. But he is just a perfect example of how great timing paired with really good technique and fundamentals can be just essential to a fighter's success, despite lacking on athletic gifts such as reach that Holland has and things like that. So Rodriguez has really good cardio for 3-rounder. I think it's because his ability to remain very balanced and poised and relaxed. He doesn't overcommit to single power shots. He's never overextended, and he's always in position to follow up and defend. Even when he has his opponents visibly hurt, he's very patient. He doesn't rush in unintelligently. His favorite weapons, he works off the back of his jab, his 1-2s, got a really nice check hook and straight left down the pipe. And he times them very well, as counters also when he pressures. So very well-rounded game. When these land clean, his follow-up shots to the opponent, they come in bunches, which you love to see. You've got a retreating opponent who's hurt, throw the volume on, and that's generally where we see a finish from him. And his defense is, pretty simple. Maybe not the best, but raise guard, move back, or time that, pull counters where he can time that, the counter left straight up down the pipe. So how does this fight play out? Pretty interesting matchup. I think it's a close one. I really do think both fighters are going to have a hard time kind of getting the edge over the other. I do expect it to be a very close fight. Holland's explosiveness, he's got his height and length, his power and athleticism will probably allow him to come out confident early as he does. But given his lack of footwork and how he overcommits to shots, overextends, he's got holes in his defense and kind of his draining cardio. I think this will leave him more open to damage as the fight continues. That's in polar opposite to D-Rod, who's got that very poised approach, got a consistent work rate, doesn't throw anything too flashy. Just has the fundamentals, has really good distance control and pressure, which will allow him to be a much more efficient fighter. And if this gets to the later rounds, we can see how much, we've seen how much he can turn it on, especially, against guys like Kevin Lee and Mike Perry, who are, maybe not Perry, but Lee was very high level. The big worry in this fight is the D-Rod's time off. Will he be rusty, or will he come back and not be able to maintain the pace he usually fights at? But given it was a hand injury that sidelined him, and having a quick flick through his Instagram and socials, looks like he's remained pretty fit throughout, doing his running. So I kind of rely on his cardio being there, but maybe his timing's a little bit off. But we'll see. I think we'll find that out pretty quickly in this fight. In terms of who's dictating the pace, I think it'll be D-Rod. He's more light on his feet, better footwork. He'll pressure Holland and work from the outside, and Holland will kind of naturally follow due to his lack of boxing footwork or inability there. And he'll try and find openings with explosive moments. He'll leap in with the 1-2, clinch with knees and elbows, really big swings where he overextends. And I kind of expect him to find the mark early in the fight a few times, potentially even stumbling or wobbling D-Rod. But seeing, the different Holland we get later in the fights, especially a good example is Darren Stewart and how relentless D-Rod can be with his pressure and his consistent work rate. I think from round 2 late onwards, if it gets there, I think he will take over. So this is a pretty dicey one, and probably not sure if this will be on the slip. Maybe. I think the odds makers are probably not far off. D-Rod very close to finishing Kevin Lee in the later rounds, round 2 and round 3. And I think it will play out kind of similar with Holland winning the first round. And then I think as he fades, as D-Rod gets more comfortable, he'll ramp up the pressure, more technical. I think he'll be landing the more substantial shots. This is a close one. I'm going to go, this might be controversial, I'm going to go with D-Rod TKO round 3. But I could see it also going to points. So not a confident pick here, but the pick's going to be D-Rod by TKO in round 3. So the next fight we're going to break down on this card is a weird one, a really weird one, but I'm going to have my comments on the actual the surrounding the fight later on. But so the next fight we're going to break down on this one is Tony Ferguson taking on Jingliang. All right, I'm going to break down these fighters first, and then we're going to go into everything surrounding this fight. So let's start with our boy Tony Ferguson. One of the biggest enigmas in the UFC, one of the greatest characters and personalities, and one of the most mismanaged careers I've ever witnessed. Got to hold myself back from ranting. Tony fights out of southpaw for the most part. He does switch fairly often with his stances, especially when he moves forward. Very stiff, upright striking style where he has very little head movement, very robotic with his movements. Kind of has two distinct patterns to me. The first is his boxing style combos. He's worked with Freddie Roach for a long time. He's got those 1-2s finishing with, these weird, they're not the most technically perfect kick, but snapping head kicks, body kicks, or teeps up the middle. And then the second is kind of he'll attack with wild looping hooks while pushing forward. And he'll use his elbows to step in and use that to close distance. I think his best attribute would have to be kind of his unpredictability and his unorthodox approach. He's a very unorthodox fighter who up until very recently was incredibly durable and kind of just hard to figure out. He was always a puzzle. He would employ his pace and pressure as a weapon to constantly make you move backwards while, he's moving forward and just draining at your tank with different shots. He was never super one shot minded. It was always an accumulation of damage. Technically striking isn't, amazing, but he will pressure you and he'll land these little things over and over and over until you break. Offensively, he's a kind of a sight to behold, big volume, damaging elbows that are just designed to cut you and make you bleed, and a good variety of just different shots, really. Defensively, he scares the living shit out of me. No head movement, no parrying, no lateral movement, doesn't really check leg kicks well. He constantly overextends when he strikes. And now that his chin, has been cracked properly for that first time in that Chandler fight, and I couldn't even watch the second round in that fight when I did tape on this one. I couldn't do it. So if there was anything that relevant that happened in that second round, I've missed it. So just heads up with that one. If his chin's been cracked and he's moving up a weight class here, there's a lot of question marks around that. In terms of his move up in weight, is there a chance that it benefits him? Sure, I think he should have probably looked at this a little bit ago and not waited till he got absolutely flatlined. A less grueling weight cut is kind of almost always a net positive. But to return 3 months after you got flatlined out cold for minutes, 3 months is just way too soon. So I just don't like this for him. He's got a very active guard off his back. He's constantly working. He'll throw elbows up, try and cut you. He'll work to get his feet on hips and look for exits, or he's just very threatening off his back. Even if he's not, he's not really finding submissions off his back a whole lot. It's just really threatening and making his opponent think on top. In terms of this fight, I just really hope we see his wrestling base return. He's such an underrated wrestler and he hasn't used it for the longest time. And I don't know why. This will give him an avenue to excel in this fight. But it also will take the pressure off his durability having to hold up. Like, if you're not threatening with anything while you're striking and you're, all the opponent is thinking about is how can they land this power shot on you, you have to have your defense hold up. And for a guy who doesn't have defense, all you've got is your durability. And I don't think he's had that anymore. So he needs to add in the takedown. Not only this, it'll make his striking far more dangerous. when, Lee is thinking about the threat of a takedown, it's in his mind, it'll potentially make his defense a little bit more sloppy. And why wouldn't you want that? So a bit on Li Jingliang. Generally fights out of orthodox, very reactive, fast twitch style where he's feints quite a lot early. He's always like throwing his hand up or like little ones, quick ones to the body. He switches his target high and low very well, and he kind of also switches the speed of his attacks quite well, which I like. He feints a few times. He'll throw a jab to the body, he'll reset, and then he'll come crashing in with like a really quick stiff cross. He also throws a lot of inside leg kicks, which I noted, which I think is kind of just a tool to distract his opponents and allow him to reset and let his opponents sink into the fight and get comfortable rather than be really damaging. When he is moving forward and pressuring, he can engage with wild hooks that are very, very looping, generally quite easy to read, but if they land, they really have a lot of power on them. Has pretty decent slipping ability, and we saw in the Salikov fight, if you're throwing weak shots his way and you're not maintaining your defense, he'll slip and fire that cross back right in the money. Very dangerous in the pocket too, given his comfortability with relying on swinging those massive looping hooks at you. And, given how defensively irresponsible Tony can be, I think that's a pretty big worry in this fight. Ponzinibbio, when he fought Lee, he had a lot of success in checking the outside calf kicks. This made Lee really hesitant to throw them, which was something interesting that I noted. And in terms of that fight, the finish was beautiful from Lee. Lee recognised that, Ponzinibbio was slipping his jab to the inside very effectively. So in order to counter this, he feinted the jab, on which Pons slipped inside preemptively too. Then Lee countered with a really quick cross down the pipe. Pons moved backwards and thought that was the end of the combo. Had his right hand down, and then Lee come over with the left hook and just put it on the button and dropped Pons. Lee's very tough and durable, and he's just a smart fighter, all of which is a pretty dangerous combo against a guy like Ferguson. In terms of the attributes in this fight, I think Lee, will be the stronger guy. In terms of size, I don't know how Tony's going to look. 3 months isn't a lot of time to stack on good muscle, but he will have a reach advantage. He doesn't really use it very well, but we'll see. We'll see come fight night. I'm interested to see how he looks on the scales. How does this one play out? Like I said when I started this one, this is just a bizarre matchup to me. For Tony, the move to welterweight, I think is a good move. It's warranted, but I question why against a guy like Leach. He hits really hard. He doesn't have, much star power. And I think on his best day, he's probably a 5 to 15 ranked fighter. It makes really no sense to me. With matchups like these, I sometimes will try to think what is the best storyline and outcome for the UFC, because that's what, the matchmakers are doing. And without doubt, the best outcome would be the resurgence of Tony Ferguson. So could Tony win this? I think he absolutely could. Off the back of his weird striking style, and a massive if, he mixes in some takedowns and grappling exchanges, I can really see a world in which he can beat the Leech. I just don't know how you can pick Tony coming off the back of that terrible KO so quickly. He's aging. He's losing his number one key trait. We as fans really want the best for our fighters, especially for a legend of the sport like Tony. So, whoever's managed his career really kind of deserves every bit of hate they get from the fans. I really think he has the most mismanaged career of all time. He had plenty of chances to really be the champion or fight for the actual title. And instead of sitting out, which you have to do sometimes, people get a lot of hate for sitting out in these fights. Like Leon Edwards was one of the most hated people in the whole sport. But sometimes you just have to sit on your morals and take the high ground. And I know that Dana and the UFC don't want to hear that, but look at Tony. He'll probably never get the credit for that run that he went on from everyone. The hardcore fans obviously understand it, but the casual fans will never get that respect. He's changed for life after that Gagey loss, and it's just kind of sad. I really want him to win this fight, but it's tough to pick him coming back off that horrible knockout really quickly. This is just a tough fight to break down. I think that Tony has a chance to win. I just can't possibly back him in this one, unfortunately. The pick is going to be Li Jingliang by UD. I'm hopeful in saying that Tony can get through this one without being finished too badly and look at some, fun money fights to finish out his career. But yeah, the pick's going to be Li Jingliang by unanimous decision. And now for the main event, we've got Khamzat Chimaev taking on Nate Diaz. So let's, again, another interesting matchup. This card is kind of bizarre. Probably one of the weaker pay-per-views getting around for a long time, but we move nonetheless. So Khamzat, orthodox boxer. His striking, I would say, is pretty serviceable. Decent technique and power, but in terms of his game, it's definitely his weak point. We all know where his bread gets buttered. Shout out to Jet in the comments with that one. I said bread gets buttered, not his bread and butter. And that is his grappling and his wrestling. He's just a physical beast for this weight class. 6'2", abnormally big, strong, and powerful for the division. He has really smothering pressure against the cage. He can use his strength to employ it in a Greco kind of style where he'll pick you up and slam you, after he gets his hands locked. But in his back pocket, he's also got the Dagestani style wrestling where he'll body lock you. He'll use his weight to get you, off balance. And then he'll work, sneaky trips and throws. Such a dominant grappler. From there, once you're on the ground, he'll use the Dagestani handcuff to trap the arm, and unleash with ground and pound on you. And then he'll just cycle through dominant position to dominant position until you either give up your neck or a submission, or the ref steps in to stop some brutal ground and pound. In terms of his wrestling, it's not always relying on strength, which I love. He's also got really good double and single leg shots from the outside for more of a folk style wrestling game, which I like. He just always has different avenues to work his wrestling, which paired in with his size and his strength is why he's just so damn dominant. When I say his striking is serviceable, he uses it generally to set up his wrestling, bar that Gilbert Burns fight. He will throw front kicks sometimes. He actually has a pretty decent jab when he does use it. He works off the back of his cross as well. He'll put a lot of power behind it. And if he misses his opponent and overextends, it's not a big issue because he kind of steps through with it and closes distance. He can be very herky-jerky on the feet. Absolutely zero head movement. When facing shots, he'll kind of just move his guard up, attempt to block strikes. So, you just do one of those ones. But in 4-ounce gloves, it's a pretty terrible defense option. And in terms of a prospect coming up, there's really no better fight that I would want to see than that Burns fight to shore up a few things about a guy like Khamzat. For me, I really love seeing him get tested so much. I actually didn't think he would get tested that much, but it really convinced me of what was in front of me. He showed an immense amount of heart to push through and win that fight, especially with a really good opponent like Gilbert, who has pretty good technical striking with good power, and he's a beast off the ground, off his back. Gilbert had a really large amount of success in that fight, pushing the pace and just being there, extending, a grueling 3-round pace. But he had a lot of success in 2 areas specifically. The first was the kicking game. He definitely took advantage of how upright Khamzat was and how little he checks kicks due to his, heavy lead leg and his pressure moving forward. The second was his counter striking with 2-3 punch combos. So what he was doing was he would let Khamzat throw first and overextend, and then he would counter with hooks with huge success, given the kind of lack of head movement that Khamzat had coming back at him. So the hook that Gilbert hit Khamzat with at the end of the second round, honestly, would have, if you hit a cow with that, you would have knocked it out. The grit that Khamzat showed was a huge tick in my books, and in terms of cardio and experience, and more importantly, kind of a check to his ego, massive positive for me. So I really enjoyed seeing that, and it shored up a lot of holes that I think was, could have been in his game had he came into a matchup like this without that one. So he's coming up here against longtime UFC star in Nate Diaz. I'm not going to call him Nathan because I'm not a cuck like Ariel Helwani, but nonetheless, in terms of the issues that Nate is going to present Khamzat, very limited, and it'll be more or less based around his ability to wear and absorb and withstand damage, and somehow, like a crackhead zombie, come out the other side still moving forward. So this is the story of Nate's career, and it's going to be the story here again in what looks like it's probably his final fight in the UFC. We'll see if that trend can continue. I'll be honest, I don't really know where Diaz excels. Pretty good jiu-jitsu off his back, but at this level, I just can't see him throwing a sub up and catching Khamzat, who can really just outpower you for the most part, and he's very capable on the ground. In terms of his striking, I guess you can call him a bit of a volume boxer, but that's kind of generous, I think. Technically, he's not superb, but his volume and output, while it has been a bit lower in the last few fights, is generally very consistent through 25 minutes. Very, very experienced over the 5 rounds. He doesn't have particularly great takedown defense, but I think this is because he's so confident off his back that he's willing to engage there. But let's be real, this matchup makes really little to no sense. I don't know. What can you say about this matchup? I really think this fight is just designed to take every part of star power off of Nate's name and give it to Khamzat, who's, on a train at the moment. And it's not a hot take at all to say that Khamzat should be winning this fight 9 times out of 10. And the odds very clearly reflect that. Look at where they are in their careers right now. I don't think Nate's going to have an answer for the physicality, the strength, mixed with the actual technicality of Khamzat's wrestling. I just don't see this ending very well for Nate. It's interesting because Khamzat, had that ego in that Burns fight, but I think that's check now. I really think he'll be better for that. I don't think he'll come in here, just thinking he can run over the top of Nate, because Nate, you can hit that dude with a fucking crowbar to the dome and he would probably just absorb it and move. So the easy path to victory, in my opinion, is to shoot on Nate, work the handcuff and ground and pound him out. And I think that's what we see here, although you just never know with Khamzat's ego or what he wants to do. I just don't know where Nate has an answer for him. He doesn't have the power to stifle that forward pressure. He doesn't have the ability to stuff the takedown or the strength to work off the cage and use his physicality. It's a tough one, man. If this fight goes longer than 3, I'll be pretty surprised. And it will be kind of sad to see a UFC star go down, but kind of fully expect Khamzat to dominate this one, off the back of his wrestling. And I think we see him get Nate out of there fairly early, first or second. I know it's a short breakdown, but I don't know where else to go with it. Yeah, it's a tough one. Where does Nate have success against Khamzat? Volume over 5? Yeah, potentially. But I just don't think he's going to have the ability to stop Khamzat, advancing position and working. And I think if Khamzat, gets that Dagestani handcuff on the ground, I think it's pretty much over. He'll land some pretty damaging ground and pound. Nate's got a lot of scar tissue. If it doesn't get stopped by the ref stepping in, might get stopped in the corner. We've seen that before. Yeah, I know it's a short breakdown, but I'm going to lock in Khamzat via TKO in round 2. So that wraps up the breakdown for UFC 279 this weekend. Pretty interesting card. I think, again, it will be pretty thin on betting. There's some huge favourites. There's a couple of dogs we're looking at, but I don't know if we'll get there. But in terms of last week, I want to do a quick recap of that. So we ended up plus 1.5 units for the day, which is a pretty good result. Our parlay came through, which has been very consistent as of lately. Would have had a pretty monster day if Jourdain had got up, but unfortunately Nathaniel Wood beat him by decision, so we pushed on one of our bets there, which was nice. Whittaker via decision came through, and we were looking at Gane via sub for a bit of value, but obviously that didn't happen. But what an epic fight that was. I do think this week will be a pretty thin betting card, so stay tuned to the Instagram for that one, but we'll see what happens. If you like the content and you want to see us continue making these types of videos, give this video a like, hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel. Really keen to keep building this community, so thanks for coming along with the ride. And yeah, I put it on our Instagram. I'm heading to Thailand in a couple of months. Ryan's heading to the United States in a few weeks. we're thinking about doing some kind of vlog training style footage. So if you're interested in that, let us know in the comments and we'll see what we can do there. It's something I'm really interested in getting across. So you might see some more there. Yeah, as always, super active on our Instagram. We're always chatting fights over there. So tag will be here at Ascendant.MMA. Head over there, give us a follow. We've been pretty slack on breaking down the other fights in text format. I've been a little bit time poor, so I apologize for that, but we're going to try and get that cranking up again. We love interacting with the community. We always chat with, fights in the DMs with a lot of people. So yeah, go over there and check us out. Yeah, let's have a good pay-per-view week and hope for some big bucks. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Pretty confident in this card, but I don't know if the value there is from a betting perspective, but we'll see. Yeah, that's all from us. So thanks, guys. We'll see you in the next one.